Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Language change, lecture 6, and we are in part 2. In part 2, we will discuss types of language change. All languages change continually and do so in many and varied ways. Marcel Cohen details various types of language change under the overall headings of the external evolution and internal evolution of languages. The study of lexical changes forms the diachronic portion of the science of onomasiology. It forms the study of lexical changes forms both sides of the science of onomasiology. The science of onomasiology is the study of terms. What are the terms and what do they mean for? The ongoing influx of new words into the English language, for example, helps make it a rich field for investigation into language change. Despite the difficulty of defining precisely and accurately the vocabulary available to speakers of English. Throughout its history, English has not only borrowed words from other languages, but has recombined and recycled them to create new meanings while losing some old words. Dictionary writers try to keep track of the changes in languages by recording and ideally dating the appearance in a language of new words or of new usage for existing words. By the same token, they may tag some words eventually as archaic or obsolete, outdated. The concept of sound change covers both phonetic and phonological developments. The sociolinguist William Labov recorded the change in pronunciation in a relatively short period in the American resort of Martha's Vineyard and showed how this resulted from social tensions and processes. Even in the relatively short time that broadcast media have recorded their work, one can observe the difference between the pronunciation of the newsreaders of the 1940s and 1950s and the pronunciation of today. The greater acceptance and fashionability of regional accents in media may also reflect a more democratic and less formal society. The mapping and recording of small-scale phonological changes poses difficulties, especially as the practical technology of sound recording dates only from the 19th century. Written texts provide the main indirect evidence of how language sounds have changed over the centuries, and poetic devices such as rhyme and rhythm may provide clues to the previous phonological habits. All aspects of language change and a great deal is known about general mechanism and historical details of changes at all levels of linguistic analysis. However, a special success has been achieved in modeling changes in phonological systems, traditionally called sound change. In the cases where we have access to several historical stages, for example, the development of the modern Romance languages from Latin, these sound changes are remarkably regular. Techniques developed in such cases permit us to reconstruct the sound system and some of the vocabulary of unattested parent languages from information about daughter languages. In some cases, an old sound becomes a new sound across the board. Such a change occurred in Hawaiian language. Hawaii, you may have heard this name. In that, all the ta sounds in an older form of the language became k's. And at the time Europeans encountered Hawaiian, there were no t's or tas in that language at all. Though the closely related languages, Tahitian, Samoan, Tongan, and Maori, they all had t's in their languages. Another unconditioned sound change that occurred between Middle and early modern English, that's around Shakespeare's time, is known as the Great Vowel Shift. At that time, there was a length distinction in the English vowels, and the Great Vowel Shift altered the position of all the long vowels in a giant rotation. The nucleus of the two high vowels, front long I and the back long U, they started to drop, and the high position was retained only in the off glide. Eventually, the original I became I. So a long I vowel in modern English is now pronounced as I, like in the word bite. I. We pronounce it as I, not I. It's I. Similarly, the long U found its nucleus dropping all the way to O. The earlier house became house. So before it was house, and now it's house. So there is change. It means the length of the vowel is decreased. All the other long vowels rotated. The mid vowels E and U rising to fill the spots vacated by the former I and U respectively, and so on. That is why the modern pronouns he and she are written with e, reflecting the old pronunciation but pronounced as I. So here we see this in this chart, the words are located where their vowel used to be pronounced before, and the arrow shows where they are pronounced today. Like you see, bite, the sound was E, the long vowel, and then beat, it is also long one, right? And bite or bait. So here you see, and now today we pronounce them in this way. So this U, long U, has become O, and I, long I, has become I. In other cases, a sound change may be conditioned so as to apply in certain kinds of environments and not in others. So these changes can be applied only to certain kinds of environment, not in other environments, not in all cases. For example, it's very common for tongue tip or coronal consonants, tongue tip consonants, to become palatal when they are followed by high front vowels. So the tongue tip consonants become palatal when they are followed by high front vowel. This is very common. The residue of this process can be seen in English pairs, like here you notice that tongue tip consonants, how they become palatal. From tongue tip they change their place of articulation. You see, divide, division, fuse, fusion, submit, submission, oppress, oppression. Process of sound change. Another dimension along which we can look at sound change is by classifying changes according to the particular process involved. Assimilation, or the influence of one sound on an adjacent sound, is perhaps the most pervasive process. Assimilation processes changed latent K when followed by I or Y, first to KY, then to CH, and then to S, so that latent fakayat, it means would make, it became fas. In modern French, which is the subjunctive of the verb faire, that means to make. And palatization is a kind of assimilation. In contrast to assimilation, dissimilation, metathesis, and haplology tend to occur more sporadically, that means to affect individual words. Other sound change processes are merger, split, loss, syncope, apocope, prothesis, and epenthesis. Let's see them one by one. Merger. Merger and split can be seen as the mirror image of each other. A merger that is currently expanding over much of the United States is the merger between short O and long open O. The following table contains examples of words that you probably pronounce differently if you are from the Philadelphia, New York, New England area, or if you are from the South. And if you are from Canada, the American Midwest, or from California, you probably find that the vowels in these pairs sound the same rather than different. If this is the case, you have a merger here. You see here short O and long open O. Caught, caught. Hot, haughty. Hawk, hawk. Stock, stalk. Splits. Splits are rarer than mergers, and usually they arise when a formerly conditioned alteration loses the environment that provided the original conditioning, and the previously conditioned alteration becomes two independent sounds that contrast with each other. This is basically what happened. When fa and va split in English, va having previously been an alternate of fa, when fa occurred in an intervocalic position. When fa occurred in an intervocalic position, so then the va was the alternate of fa. Loss, va was pronounced or uttered in place of fa. Loss involves the loss of sound from a language. For example, we had just seen that Hawaiian language lost the ta in favor of ka. Syncope and apocope. Syncope and apocope are the loss of medial and final sounds respectively. The syncope means you lose the medial sound, and apocope means that you lose the final sound from a word. So here we have examples of syncope and apocope. In Middle English, not in modern English, in the Middle English time, the word tame was pronounced in past as timid. So the past of tame in Middle English was timid, and it lost both of its medial and final vowels. So its medial vowel is E after M, and the final is E after D. So it lost both of these vowels, and in modern English it became as tamed. So the modern English past of tame is tamed. In this way it lost both the medial vowel and the final vowel. So in medial vowel it means the loss of medial means syncope, the operation is syncope, and the loss of final vowel or final sound is apocope. So here we have example of both of these terms, operations. So these are usually conditioned changes that do not involve loss of the same sound elsewhere. I mean, this is not a general rule that you lose these same sounds elsewhere. This is for particular environment, for particular words, and for just for special cases. Prothesis and epenthesis. Prothesis and epenthesis are the introduction of additional sounds initially and medially respectively. Prothesis when you add an additional sound, and epenthesis when you add a medial sound somewhere. Here we have the example of this prothesis and epenthesis. The addition of a that made Latin word like escola, that means school, into Portuguese escola is the example of prothesis in historical linguistics textbooks. And as for epenthesis, an example is da inserted into medieval English Thunerian to give us the modern English thunder. So in medieval English the word was Thunerian, but with the operation of epenthesis, the process of epenthesis, da is inserted there, and in modern English we got a new word that is thunder for the medieval English Thunerian. Spelling changes. Standardization of spelling originated centuries ago. Differences in spelling often catch the eye of a reader of a text from a previous century. If somebody from previous century comes here, or he reads today's language, so the difference in spelling often catches his eye, or would catch his eyes. I mean, he will notice that, oh, how big changes have occurred in spellings. The pre-print era had fewer literate people. That's a fact. Before, print area, the people literacy rate was very low, and languages lacked fixed system of orthography. Of course, because of illiteracy, the orthography level was also very low, and the handwritten manuscripts that survive often show words spelled according to the regional pronunciation and to personal preferences. So there was no fixed system, so people would write as per their personal preferences and per their regional pronunciations. Semantic changes. Semantic changes are shifts in the meanings of existing words. Basic types of semantic changes include, here we have actually two groups. In each group we have two types. Pejoration, in which a term's connotations become more negative. And when there is a process of pejoration, so there connotations of a term become more negative. And amelioration, in which a term's connotations become more positive. So pejoration, when term's connotation becomes negative. Amelioration, when term's connotation becomes positive, more positive than the original one. And broadening, a term in which a term acquires additional potential uses. Broadening, so its uses are broadened. And narrowing, in which a term's potential uses are restricted. So let's see them by one. After a word enters a language, its meaning can change as through a shift in the valence of its connotation and in the chemistry of its connotation. As an example, when villain entered English, it meant peasant or farmhand. So when villain entered in the word villain entered into English, its meaning was peasant, a farmer or a farmhand, but it acquired the connotation of lowborn or scoundrel, and today only the negative use survives. Thus villain has undergone pejoration. So now it started with the meaning of positive but weaker positive meaning, but later on its connotation turned into negative, and now we have only its connotation is only negative. You understand what does villain mean. If you hear villain, what comes in your mind, positive or negative? So this this is pejoration. Villain, the word villain has undergone the process of pejoration. Next is the example of the opposite of pejoration, that is amelioration. For example, the word wicked. Wicked is undergoing amelioration in colloquial context, shifting from its original sense of evil to the much more positive one as of 2009 of brilliant. Now wicked is used for the meaning of brilliant also. So its connotation has turned into positive. And conversely to pejoration. Words' meanings may also change in terms of the breadth of their semantic domain. So their domain is broadened. The meanings domain is broadened of certain words. That is one type of process that we saw there. What was that? It was I forgot the name. Broadening. We call it broadening. Yes. And narrowing, a word limits its alternative meanings, whereas broadening associates new meaning with it. So in broadening, you add some meaning to it, and narrowing a word limits its alternative meaning. So in narrowing, you just narrow down the meaning. The list of meanings is shortened in this process. So this is also a kind of language change. And one word is taken for 10 meanings, and after some time that word has only a couple of meanings. That's also a language change. You do not understand, you do not take certain words for the meaning that were taken before. For example, hound in Old English once referred to any dog, whereas in modern English it denotes only to a particular type of canid or dog. Before, the domain of hound was wide, okay, but now it's restricted to only a particular type of dog. On the other hand, the word dog has been broadened. Its meaning, or the domain of its meaning is broadened from its Old English root dog, doggy, the name of a particular breed. So before, the dog was used as a name of a particular breed, but now it has become the general term for all canines, for all breeds of dogs. So this is broadening, and the first one, the example of hound, that is narrowing. Syntactic changes. Syntactic change is the evolution of the syntactic structure of a natural language. Over time, syntactic change is the greatest modifier of a particular language. Massive changes, attributable either to Creolization or relaxification, may occur both in syntax and in vocabulary. So massive changes can occur both in syntax as well as in vocabulary. Syntactic change can also be purely language internal with a particular language, whether independent within a syntactic component or eventual result of phonological or morphological change. Quantification. Alternates, can and patterns introduce a systematic approach to language change quantification by studying unconsciously used language features in time-separated parallel translations. For this purpose, they use objective style markers such as vocabulary richness and lengths of words, word stems and suffixes, and employ statistical methods to measure their changes over time. Dissimilation. Dissimilation involves a change in one of two same sounds that are adjacent or almost adjacent in a particular word, such that they are no longer the same. Thus, the first L in English, colonel, is changed to an R, and the word is pronounced like kernel. Haplology is similar to dissimilation because it involves getting rid of similar neighboring sounds, but this time one sound is simply dropped out rather than being changed to a different sound, as we saw in dissimilation. An example is the pronunciation of modern English probably, which is pronounced as probably. This is haplology, when we drop some sound. Metathesis, this is not mathematics, says metathesis involves the change in order of two adjacent sounds. So here we have we see the change in the order of two adjacent sounds. For example, here we have example by Crystal. He cites modern English third from old English thread. Here you see the shuffling of sound, adjacent sound, IR and RI in these two words, third and thread. And modern English bird is a parallel example.